Hello, everybody, and welcome to a cup of self-empowerment to trust, heal, and be thyself. I'm absolutely delighted to invite someone to our Cuppa Hub who's from my home shores, of the shores of Suffolk. So this is Natasha Joy Price. And for those who don't know Natasha, Natasha is an energy therapist, a spiritual teacher, a coach, and an author. She spent the last 21 years exploring and learning all about energy, where it comes from, and how it can help us. Her first book, Freedom of the Soul, is a proactive workbook helping the reader to find their spiritual path through energy management. For the last 2.5 years, Natasha has presented Balm to the Soul podcast, which is now over 70 episodes, and she regularly presents teaching and has a slot on the Felixstowe Radio show as well. Her offerings can be found on her website, which is www.dandeliontherapies.co.uk, and Instagram as Natasha Price Author. And her second book is also shortly to be released. So welcome, Natasha.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me on. It's lovely.
Oh, it's really, really nice. The big brewing question, I mean, you've been doing energy work now for the last 21 years, and you've really tapped into it, going back and seeing what it is, how it forms, how it can help us. What was the moment, would you say, where you was like, okay, I'm going to start trusting myself and being guided to this? Or how were you actually guided to it in the first place?
Well, that's really a good story.
Okay, share. We like good stories.
So I just had my third child, and I had terrible swollen ankles. And my mother said to me, "Why don't you go and see Rosie and have a Reiki?" And I had never heard the word, knew nothing about it. I was in my 30s, and spiritual healing modalities just hadn't come into it up to that point.
I understand that well.
Yeah. So I went along, and I don't think I relaxed at all. I had my eyes shut, but I was thinking, where is she? What's she doing? You know, you're on sort of. And then I had a very, very strange experience. And instead of frightening me, it just fascinated me. And the walls of my little life at that point fell down. And I thought, how have I got to this age that I haven't seen this, or I didn't know that this existed, or I haven't experienced this? And that propelled me on this 21-year journey to date of just learning so much that I could learn, because I was just so fascinated. Sorry, my puppy is doing something. Blue. Yeah. And what I experienced was, I was lying there and I felt as if the room was full of spirit.
Okay.
And the spirit was almost like you would see on the films, you know, like you get the ghosts with the sort of sheet, if you like, and then their head. And they were whizzing around the room to such a point that one came, and I actually physically moved because it was right in my face.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often thought about it afterwards, and I've thought, why was it shown to me like that? But I think they were showing it to me so that I realized that it was spirit.
They were identifying it with something which you'd seen on like television, which is not what actually spirit looks like, you know.
No,
but
of course
to make you think, okay, is this spirit? Yeah, to actually put that
to get that link
to your mind.
Yeah. And I think also to shock me a bit, to say, you know, wake up, we're here.
That is quite shocking. I think, you know, it's quite.
Yeah. So, but it didn't frighten me in the slightest. And that was also another point to it. There was no fear there. It wasn't frightening. It was done in such a way that I just became fascinated.
Okay.
So I then learnt Reiki with this lovely lady who'd given me the treatment, and it just went from there, really.
Yeah, it's a lot of us like that. It goes from the Reiki,
Yeah. Reiki is like a really good starting point for anybody, I think.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just like, obviously, okay, I'm going to trust what I've been shown by spirit. And then where did it progress after, like, when you took that initial step to trust yourself? Because how were the swollen ankles? Did the energy healing help that in the end?
They did help that, yes. They did help that. That sorted itself out. And I went on to learn Reiki at all the stages and went up to master level with this lady, Rosie. And I've often looked back and thought, because in my other life, I'm a property lawyer, I'm a solicitor. So it's a very logical, you're taught to be very logical and look at certain facts and come to a conclusion. So a lot of the time I had that head on when I was doing Reiki, and I'd often think, I don't know what's going on here. I don't really know what's happening. But I always felt, because at that point I had the 3 young children, I always felt like my batteries had been recharged.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling that I had after I'd been for a session made me keep going back. And I somehow recognized something's happening. I don't know what it is, but something's happening. It feels good. I feel better in my day-to-day life, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
But I didn't really understand until a bit later.
Yeah. I think it is like, you know, when you're having it yourself and you're right at the beginning and you're like experiencing something new. I know from my own experience, it was very much similar. The fact is, I was guided to Reiki. Didn't also know what it was, but it was like, okay, I was at a point where I really needed to help myself. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And it just worked on, obviously it works on so many levels.
Yeah.
It was just my logical mind at that time, because I wasn't in that spiritual mindset at all.
No.
I was just like, well, I don't really know what's going on. But as you said, I just felt better. And I felt stuff was being shifted out. I had a lot of emotional trauma going on as well. So I felt that was being healed as well. And yeah, to know that you've got that tool yourself. We spoke before, you know, to have that tool yourself, it gives you so much reassurance that you've got that self-help tool in your own hands, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very important, that you can do your own self-healing. And
especially with kids, I know mine had trouble sleeping, and like my oldest now, even if he has trouble now, he will say, Mum, can you give me some Reiki, please? Or if the youngest like hurts himself with football, he's like, Mom, you know, I've got a tummy ache. And then just sit there and then they're like, okay, I'm good now. And you're like, okay.
Yeah. No, my kids were exactly the same, and that's lovely because Reiki becomes part of their normal family life.
Yeah.
It's not something shocking or, you know, I've never seen this before. It's just becomes part and parcel, and that's really so important.
It's nice. It's nice. And it's a good connection between parent and child as well. Non-invasive as well. So it's great. Yeah. And we know
my middle daughter. Sorry. I was going to say my middle daughter was attuned to Reiki when she was 11.
Oh, I keep thinking my boys, like my youngest is 11 now, and like I think there's a very strong interest there, and I keep saying, he's like, oh no, you do it, Mommy. And I'm just like, no, I think for kids, it can be a very empowering process.
Yes, absolutely. And it gives them extra tools for life. You know, there's a lot of anxiety around that age, young adults, and it just gives them another tool that they can fall back on.
Well, you know, for yourself, if you're having like a moment or something, even if you're at work or you're out somewhere and you maybe like have an anxiety rising or something like that, or you just feel like you're not feeling not quite right, you can literally tune in with yourself and really just bring yourself back to balance, which is good. So obviously Reiki is where you kind of started. And we know when we do have Reiki sessions, it heals, but also unpacks lots of other stuff as well where we need to go deeper.
Yes, definitely.
So I guess for you, that was also the start where you probably started doing a lot of healing work on yourself.
Yes.
Yeah,
definitely. And at that time, I sat in circle for 6 years as well.
Oh, wow.
Which I found fascinating. And that really sort of introduced me to all sorts of other sort of ideas and exercises and sort of healing modalities, and also gave me a group of like-minded people to connect with, etc.
A safe space to step into it as well.
Yeah. And then from there, I just carried on, and I then went on to train as a past life regression therapist.
And it's a little bit about past life regression. That's one of my favorite topics as well, I must admit.
It's a very, very powerful modality, but very interesting. And I did a diploma, so I did that for 2 years. And whenever you're doing something and you become so immersed in it, it's just amazing. And of course, you practice on yourself, and you know, your colleagues practice on you. So it's a constant healing, a constant discovery, basically.
It is. It's like a puzzle, isn't it? I find it's like a jigsaw puzzle that you like realize. I don't want to say there's people and bits missing from us, but it's bits of ourselves that we've forgotten. And it's kind of like remembering. I always think it's like a remembrance of who you actually are at soul level and why things are unpacking themselves. And we know for a lot of us, it doesn't always unpack itself in the preferred choice or way. And that can be really uncomfortable and can get quite heavy and dark and you can get yourself in quite a low place like that. It's the polarity of being here on the planet. There's the joy, but there's also the sadness as well, which and especially with everything which has gone on, it can get heavy because you pick up, if you're sensitive, you're picking up on the energy on everybody around you collectively as well, and you're feeling that too. And also with like when you're doing the energy work, it gives you that opportunity to learn how to transmute that so you can keep yourself afloat, basically.
And I very much believe that we're all here to learn lessons.
Yes.
And sometimes they're really, really tough, but if we can switch it and think, what is it that I'm learning here? What is it that I'm supposed to be understanding?
It's the blessing in that not so nice lesson, basically.
And that's difficult, especially in it's very difficult. But if you can do that, it shifts a lot quicker. You get that understanding.
And it's always a work in process.
Absolutely.
And you're going to have days where, I know myself, there's days where I really have to kick myself and really shift myself. And then as soon as I've shifted myself, I'm like, really? I feel a bit better. It's like, really what, because your mind then starts creating all these thoughts, which in like, and unpacking itself, and then all the fear comes up. And if you let that go down a rabbit hole, it can get quite draining.
It can. Earth apparently is one of the hardest places. This is a school. We are here, and it's hard. It's hard. It's not supposed to be easy. It's hard work.
But we need to make sure we're bringing more joy into it, and I think that's the lesson. Trying to carve that into our lives. And
if we get the understanding that they are lessons, and we're not being punished or
no, but it's as you say, in that moment, you don't think, oh, great, I'm learning this lesson here. It's like, really? Seriously? Again? Why? What's wrong with me? That kind of comes out. So it's like shifting out. It's like, okay, let's look at it from the higher perspective. Like when, you look back at Ash, you go from that higher perspective. And also when you're going from the spirit and with your past life regression, you can go back and see, okay, is this something that you haven't learned in a previous life? That's why it's coming back.
And is it a thread that keeps coming back and keep continuing because you just haven't got that realization yet? Definitely.
Okay, for people who don't know anything about past life regression, okay, because I know there's a lot of people interested in this, can you kind of explain it to us, please?
Yeah, sure. I do past life regression therapy, but what you're doing is that you are going into trance in a very deep, relaxed state. And then as the practitioner, we guide you, we follow the energy basically. And we set an intention to perhaps see the root of an issue, or perhaps why you have a phobia, or perhaps the relationship that you have with somebody in your life at the moment. Did you have a relationship with them in another life in a different way? All sorts of information we can collect. And then we take them into trance, into this very relaxed state, and we start to have a look at that and we see what comes up. And it's very much a mixture of, it's not like a big movie screen and we just watch it.
No, of course not.
No, it's about, it can be visuals, but it's also, it's sort of all these threads. It's like visuals, it can be sound and smell, it can be knowing, it can be just emotion coming up, you can feel it. It's all this sort of, and our brain puts it all together into this story and this understanding, really. And what is amazing, because skeptics will say, well, you've probably seen a film that showed you that, or you've read a book or whatever. but it's the emotion. It's the emotion. I've had people who've just laid there and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed.
Because they're
You know,
releasing, they're letting it go.
yeah. And it's raw and it feels personal because it is personal.
Totally.
Yeah. So it's a very, very powerful modality, very powerful. But I've come to understand that past, present, and future is actually not linear.
Of
And
course, yeah, it's not linear.
well,
I know that
yeah,
from you.
quite
Yeah.
hard concept, but it's not. It's for me, it's actually happening all at the same time. It's a bit like a cobweb for me. So we
Okay.
can jump to these little bits of intersections that are perhaps useful for now,
Yeah.
and tap into that soul energy and see what they're doing at that time. What have they learned? Is it something I'm struggling with now? Have I forgotten that? It's a very empowering and very powerful modality.
It
And
is, definitely.
yeah, and all the imagery and the feelings become part of your memory bank. They don't fade. So
And
of
your
all,
cells as well.
yeah, of all the past life regression, I can recall all of them. It's not like they merge and you forget them, because they just become these very strong, it's almost like files
Yeah.
in your soul history. You can
But
go
it's
and
like you can link that to
out.
the Akashic records, basically, because then
Yeah,
you've got it's your soul, that everything which has happened to your soul, your Akash is
yeah,
everything, every thought, every memory, everything which has happened, past, present, and all the possible futures. And as you say, that's all one timeline, really, basically.
yeah,
We have that linear way of thinking, because for us, yesterday I
to
went to
help us
work, or yesterday I
understand
done
it.
this or something like that, and tomorrow I plan to go and do that. The way we as humans have that to live doesn't work on the spiritual level so much.
Yeah.
It's not,
And
it's
then
a different time feeling.
yeah, no, it's all happening at the same time.
Mm.
And then in the therapy part of it, we often take people past the point of death in that lifetime.
Yeah.
And then they can talk to the characters there. They can get some understanding. Perhaps they will recognize their energy and realize it's their son, their brother, their mother, whoever.
Yeah.
And that can give them insight into how their relationship is now. And
Yeah.
of course, seeing that, feeling that, understanding that, everything shifts in your current life and your future
Totally.
lives as well.
Definitely. And also, it's like sometimes, even if you're not getting it completely unpacked, it's happening at that very subtle,
Oh yeah,
subconscious level, that is still doing the work that it needs to do.
yeah. As soon as
And
you
then
tap
also,
into it,
yeah,
it starts.
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Because like some people who are not visual and might start to think, oh my God, but I don't see things and stuff like that. And if you got that thing, then you're going to start blocking it a little bit more, because you're putting yourself under pressure.
yeah,
So it's still doing what it needs to do. And that's with all the modalities. I find, what you can dip into, the work's being done. It might not be bang in your face telling you exactly what's going on, but it's going to be doing the work. Definitely.
It's like a little ripple, isn't it, in your soul energy, and it just
And ripples through you, then ripples on the people around you, goes forward and backwards, past generations,
absolutely.
future generations.
Yeah,
It's like the cauldron's being stirred, and everything's being sorted out a little bit. So how did you actually say, okay, obviously you've got your very rational thinking job. Has this always been going on parallel to your corporate world? Yeah.
Pretty much so. I've been
Did you feel like you were hiding that at some point? And was there a point where you say, no, this is who I am?
I wouldn't say I hid it, but I wasn't very vocal about it.
Yeah,
okay. And the times I was vocal about it, I've actually had other lawyers go, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so quite dismissive, really, because I don't understand it. So, let's not talk about it. And I've sort of, that's been a very slow progress. But now, I think a few years ago, I just thought, oh, you know what, sod it. This is me. This is what I believe in. If you want to think I'm mad, then fair enough. But actually, having that corporate job actually sort of stopped people thinking that I'm completely... Because clearly I'm not, because I do this job. But so So yeah, I'm much more vocal about it now. Hence,
Yeah.
I'm talking to you now. And
Yeah.
but at first, it was. I think sometimes you can be a bit unsure initially. You know, is this? It's not that you want. It's not that you don't connect to it and you don't love it yourself,
Yeah.
but you don't want anybody else to undermine it either. You don't want that
Yes.
sort of, oh, you're talking rubbish.
Well, yeah,
Sort
it's
of,
that you don't want, people thinking less of you or thinking,
yeah,
"Oh, okay, yeah,
yeah.
because
Or
it's not
even that there's
everyone's,
that conflict as well around it.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I feel so more it's turning into a lot of people's cup of tea at the moment.
yeah,
People are,
yeah,
collectively, we are going in that direction. There's people who have been doing this work for years and years and years, decades.
yeah.
They're looking back and seeing all the people coming in, I'm very relatively new to all this. I've been
Mm,
doing this work now since 2016. That's not long. That's not 10 years
no,
yet.
no.
So, I'm still in that, still very fresh, really, in comparison to people who've been doing it since 1980s, 1970s. They've been doing this for a long time. And that was very much hush hush under the table because,
Yeah.
yeah.
But there is a real momentum, and I've seen
Mhm.
that even more so in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
There's a real sort of influx of more information, if you like, and more people asking questions and realizing that there is something happening, and that energy healing has got a place, and it
And the
is,
science and the medical, if you
yeah,
like, supporting it as well.
yeah,
It's starting to
exactly,
weave itself together, which is so
yeah,
important because
yeah,
then you're going to connect to a lot of people, because the people who will be very logically minded and want to see it from the scientific, from the medical perspective, which I completely
yeah,
understand, are going to want to have that, in that rational way to
yeah,
connect to it. And there's
yeah,
those, which I put myself in, which feel it and,
yeah,
just have that knowing and just very much, okay, I trust. I
yeah,
surrender to it. But I'm not going to make a medical diagnosis because I don't know
no,
that.
yeah.
So,
I'm a bit down the middle because my first degree was in earth sciences. So I was a
oh,
science,
wow.
yeah. And then I sort of morphed into law because I thought it would be easier with kids. And
Yeah.
then I did a master's in parapsychology, which was just
Ooh,
about that. How can we merge science and metaphysical
yeah.
and sort of, but what that's meant is that I've had a very inquiring mind, I think, but I need to know
Right.
more about what you're saying. So
Yeah.
in crystal healing, it's not enough to say this crystal does that. I want to know, well, why does it do that?
Yeah.
Where's the science behind that? So that's always been my
Yeah.
sort of
Oh,
weaving
yeah.
it
I get that
together.
completely. You can't just say, "Oh, just
Yeah.
put this on you, it'll sort you out." You have to give reason behind that.
Yeah.
It's just like not that's not that much surrendering. I mean, if you
No.
are that way, that's absolutely fine. Each to their own, and there's no right or wrong. But
Yeah.
you want to know the properties of the healing and how it is going to work for you, and what could happen, what is not going to happen, or it all happens
And
differently too as well.
yeah, but what I found is that I know from my own experiences that there are things happening. I
Mm,
have had so many affirmations along the way
mm,
that I know it's not enough to just dismiss it
yeah.
because it doesn't fit into some scientific box.
Yeah.
That's not good enough anymore. And I think that's what people are beginning to realize.
Mm.
Yeah, there is something to this. We might not fully understand it, but there is something. So we
And there's
need to
also
keep
that
looking.
uniqueness. That's why it
Yeah,
can't always be put into that scientific box, because
no,
sometimes it's a unique something which only your soul will get,
yeah,
kind of thing. It's for your journey. It's going to make that click for you. You might not understand why, but you just know.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And for a long time, if it didn't fit into that box, science would say it didn't exist.
Mm.
So we're beginning to sort of shift that a little bit, I think.
So are
So
you
that's quite
merging now
interesting.
into your, obviously, because you've got a very inquisitive mind, um, with your first degree? I mean, that sounds fascinating. It sounds
Well,
absolutely,
it was geology. Basically,
yeah.
that's what it was all about. Uh,
Okay.
And funnily enough, the modules, because it was a modular degree, but the
Mhm.
modules that I loved the most was the crystals. and the fossils. I
Oh,
just absolutely loved them.
yeah.
And then I sort of finished it, did my law, got my kids, and then I came full circle and I came back to crystals and fossils, but in a different way.
Yeah.
It was
With
quite
that knowledge
interesting.
from beforehand.
Yeah, yeah. So it was quite interesting to see that sort of progression and
Definitely.
yeah. But I also teach about frequencies now, and that also is a
Of
sort of
course.
whole different, a cycle and I've often thought, why did I decide to do geology? But now looking back on it,
You were automatically guided,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
yeah, it's always part and parcel of all
Yeah.
the things that I was going to do,
Well, it's
basically.
fascinating. It's amazing that you get to incorporate it now in your today. It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, I absolutely love it. I dragged the kids off looking at cliffs and
Oh, yeah.
rock strata many a time, and they're like, "Oh,
Sorry, Mom,
really?"
we're not at school. Stop.
But I do. I find it fascinating, really, really interesting.
That's good. That's really lovely. It's just really making my mind go inquisitive now because yeah, imagine such a degree what you could do. That's just like wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's just been so interesting. So, I mean, if people are drawn to do something, it's a do it
yeah, that's
because
what so my next question was for you actually.
yeah,
What advice would you like to give our viewers today if they're feeling some kind of hunch or they're kind of, they're watching this, they're being called to watch this. So, something's intuitively guiding them on their path. So
yeah.
what would you like to recommend to them or what advice could you give them today?
I think it's just that you need to, if something pulls you, like geology pulled me all those years ago, and and I couldn't possibly have seen how I would use that.
No,
No,
no.
no way on earth. um, but it has come back and it's been incredibly useful and it keeps coming back in different ways.
Yeah.
So if you're drawn to follow something, then do it. Then
Mm,
just do it. Use your intuition.
trust
And
it.
and
Mm,
like you were saying, there is so much information in our energy fields and it's all so unique.
yes.
I'm talking about your past lives, I'm talking about your current life experiences, traumas,
Yeah.
talking about the possibility of your future lives. That's all mixed in.
Yeah.
You can't, when you start to think about it, you can't think about it logically.
No, you
You
can't.
can't.
It's just impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm,
so we are all completely and utterly unique, and
yeah.
our paths will be unique. And we might all get to the same point at some point, the same understanding,
Hmm.
but we might have had a very different route. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
about finding your spiritual path. It's about what resonates with you and just going with it. And you often meet people along the way that,
Yeah.
at workshops that you were
Yeah.
supposed to meet, and you call these people in and they're important to you in the next step. And
Yeah. It's like we're
it's
given little keys. I like to see it's like we're giving little keys to each other, It's like,
yeah,
okay, hi, you're back. Here's your key. Kind of
yeah,
thing. And like
yeah,
unlock something in you. It's why I
yeah,
use it like the symbol of a key, because it unlocks something in you which you might have suppressed, which you might have not remembered anymore, or
yeah,
wasn't aware of. And it unlocks it, that connection. You're
yeah,
activating something in them, they're activating something in you. And then you travel a part of your path together for a certain amount of time, or maybe for longer. And then you get guided
yeah, you do.
totally.
And what I found is sometimes you meet people and you recognize them on a soul level so deeply.
Yes.
But
Yes. And you're just like, but I have no like that. Yeah.
don't know who you are, never seen you in this current, but that you've known
They
them.
feel familiar in some way.
Yeah. And that can be a very positive thing. It can be amazing, but it can also be quite a difficult experience,
Hmm.
especially, romance wise.
Yeah.
It might not work out. And you think, well, what's that all about then? But it's about the learning. It's about that thread through the soul essence.
Yeah.
What were you learning about together?
Yeah.
What's that? Was it perfect last time and then this
Mm.
time not so good? And there's all sorts of things it could be. But it's important that we recognize that and just go with it, really.
Yeah, and even though we're saying that everything is like happening at the same time, of course, for us to have the past, present, and the future, that's the way we can bring it into this here and now, that we can understand it.
Make sense
Our
of it.
mind can understand it. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And you're actually writing a new book.
I am writing a new book.
So what's your new book about, if I may ask? So you can just a little bit of a teaser.
It's about past life regression therapy, actually.
Ooh.
And it's just a novel. It's based on events, but not, it's been embellished on.
Okay.
And lots of spiritual themes for it, lots of things that were important to me, like spirit animals and
Oh, wow.
frequencies and, crystals and essential oils and
Oh,
lots of stuff.
lovely.
All sorts of threads going through it.
Nice. Oh, that
Yeah.
sounds really, really good. Because your first book is
Freedom of the soul.
that's it, Freedom of the Soul.
I should give you a little
Ah,
freedom of
and
the
that's a
soul.
workbook, right?
Yeah, it's basically a self-help book. It's a proactive workbook in energy management. But
Oh,
it's sort of,
that's something very important that we could all do with. Yeah.
oh, absolutely. It's something I bang on about all the time.
Yeah.
We should be looking at the cleanliness and what's happening in our energy field all the time. Just like we brush our teeth and look at our diet and maybe take some supplements or whatever it is,
Yeah.
we should be checking in on our energy field every day, basically.
Okay. And this workbook explains and teaches people how to do that?
It does, and it helps people find their own unique path.
Yeah.
It was really written when my daughter hit their late teens, because
Okay.
a lot of their peers were having real issues with anxiety and, different issues that were going on. And I felt like I wanted to give that sort of generation extra tools that they could understand that actually life doesn't happen to you. You can be proactive in how you move through life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's designed to help people find that unique path that we've been talking about, and to try things out and to journal and to start using all those tools and find their way really
Brilliant.
where they're supposed to go.
Oh, that sounds great. Oh, that sounds really good, especially as you said, for like the younger generation now, as in those who are at school now, who are off to university now. This is where they're going to start really. They're really walking that now. They're in that kind of.
And especially since the pandemic, there's still a lot of anxiety that's really being heightened for a lot of young people.
Of course.
Stuck inside, not really had that social.
And there was so much fear mongering with it alongside it. That's the problem as well. Obviously, it's not something we're going to talk about now, but it stays imprinted.
Yeah. And it's to help them, it's to give them extra tools, but actually anybody, because we all at some point can come to a bit of a crossroads and think, well, what now? What am I supposed to be doing now? So it just sort of sets you off again, really, just trying meditations, all sorts of concepts and ideas, and encouraging the reader to go off on a tangent, because that's your tangent.
We all have
You
our
go
own
off on it.
tangents that we need to go on. We do. We do completely. And that's available in all bookstores. It's on Amazon as well as.
It's on Amazon.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely lovely, and I will definitely have to catch up again soon and go in a bit more deeper about, I think biology or geology or something like that.
Yeah, no, that
say the
would
word properly today, but never mind, you know what I mean.
No, thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
So how can people reach out to you? Obviously, I mentioned a website, can people just connect with you there as well?
Yes, they can look on the website, Dandelion Therapies, or I have the Instagram account, Natasha Price Author, and they can connect in. I've also got a Facebook account, Balm to the Soul, which ties in.
Balm to the Soul. Okay. That's
so
also
they
the
can,
name of your podcast, isn't it?
yes, so that it
Yeah.
ties in with that, so they can comment and reach out to me that way. There are
Brilliant.
lots
Or
of
you can
ways.
always get in contact with me and I can put you in Natasha's direction. That's absolutely not a problem at all. Wow. Well, everyone who's watching today, thank you so much for joining us for a cup of self-empowerment. And I hope this has nourished your soul as it's nourished mine today. And wishing you a beautiful rest of the day or a beautiful evening, depending where you are in the world. And I look forward to connecting you with you next time for a cup of self-empowerment. And thank you, Natasha, once again for joining us today. And take good care of yourself as well. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.